Good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening, or whatever it is. It's good. And we're going to talk about interviews today. I'm going to talk generically about ways to do them. And then we'll get into specifics that might apply for some of you that might be specking how to talk about your startup, how to get your gig going. Preparing for and conducting an interview. My God, I've been teaching a long time, huh? Well, it is, and it's good. Before the interview and the phone interview is so much that happens prior to make sure you're prepped. First, you got to Google, you got to know, you got to have an idea, not only of what they publish, but some interesting personal aspects of their lives. If you can, look at their, possibly use their CV, look at their CV and or, so when I Google, very specifically, I Google their name and the word CV if they're a professor, and the word resume if they're anyone else. And I look for that. Sometimes I can get information that way, a little bit more about them that may not be posted. Of course, we look for anything else that's posted on bio pages, on personal web pages. Really important to write a short purpose statement. Again, 2 or 3 bullets so you can scan it when you're actually talking to the person to make sure you're on point if you want. But I find it helpful, so helpful to say, hey, what's the bottom line here? So I've got a guy, he's going to want to look at being basically a trader of Lego blocks, rare, fun, hard to find. I've got them. I can sell them to you, kind of thing. Well, a big thing there is transactional, making sure you can find the right part. So making sure whatever's submitted to him, it has a protocol, probably, right? So one of the things he wants to do is talk with another guy who runs a website similar. One of the purpose statements, of course, is how do you make sure you're getting the product to the person that they need, and how do you do so efficiently without taking ungodly amount of time? So I'm sure there's a lot of organizational issues there, and maybe even some ideas of how they get supplies or not, how they can locate parts quickly. So that's interesting. Short list, tentative questions. I always keep these in bullets and I keep them on one page, and I never put space between them to answer. I just have them as a reference point. Sometimes putting them on a card, and literally if it's on a Zoom, which is nice, is we can actually fake it, right? Fake it to make it. I'm gonna have a good buddy of mine coming in who's a marketing guy. He does this all the time. He does it on Post-it notes right next to the camera, so he can glance over to the right, post that little note that has those bullet questions. He can kind of run through very quick. Short list, awesome. Test the medium, don't assume. Don't assume, for example, that you know everything about Zoom before you go on it. Make sure you've kind of tweaked a little bit. Maybe go on with your roommate to make sure the sound sounds good with your mic. Those kind of things are important. Test it, right? Test to make sure we're good. Schedule the interview for a max of 30 minutes. This is variable, of course, but 90% of the time we can do things in 30 minutes, right? We can get it done. And the other thing is, it does a lot to the person. It does a lot in terms of engendering goodwill with the person you're interviewing. And really good for them to know that, right? So make sure when you interview, we'll mention that you mentioned that you're going to interview for a short period of time. I think given your situation, introducing yourself by major university, but then quickly by your research interests and curiosity is important. This is not just an assignment. Do not say, I'm trying to get this assignment knocked out. Play the pity party and take out the violin, because here's what happens. People think, oh, great, so I'm your fail-safe, or I'm the person that's going to bail you. It immediately puts out the signal that you're just trying to get it done. And and sometimes it goes beggarly, which is weird. And I've received these requests. Oh, I got to get this deadline by tomorrow, could you interview me? And you're thinking like, okay, so did you interview like 3 profs before me and they said no? And I'm like, your last result, what am I, just a charity guy that's dishing it out? I mean, so you have to think from the other end. And you're saying, oh, that's rude, the professor doesn't care. No, it's not rude. It's the person has time and they're an expert, and you can't assume. And again, with interviews, especially, we don't assume 24-hour loops. Never. Interviews are always within a week, week and a half out with a professional. So please, you don't spring it on people. Don't play the violin of I'm a victim and I have to get it done. That's not going to work. That's not professional. Tell your knowledge of their expertise. When you front that in the interview, in the email request, all the better, both and. So you want to make sure they know that you know what they know. All right. Playful, I know, but nonetheless, okay, request the interview point blank. How you want the interview to take place too. Is it going to be by phone? Is it going to be by email? You give them a couple options, Zoom, perhaps all 3 options. I like to think brief will do it. So I like to go under the 30 minutes. I like to propose usually 10 to 15, and you can get a lot done. So again, 30-minute max, always mention the time and give advance thanks. So sometimes using the phrase even with advance thanks, or just say, thank you for your consideration. Cool. Before the interview, we briefly chit chat. So one of the greatest tactics I learned when I was doing broadcast interviews, when I go into a site, is I would simply look for some photos. This is a technique that sales marketing folk will tell you about all day. It's not like a technique, it's just life, like how to build relationships. But when you walk into a room, we're looking for photos, especially family photos, and just referencing that, or trophies, referencing that, or they've got the big, you know, Bills poster up. Well, there's your cue, something they care about. So it's fun to get into that because that's life. And, frankly, I would hope it's genuine. It's just real that we look at it saying, hey, I want to know a little bit about you. You're on the planet, might be a really cool person. Let's find out about you. So it's not transactional. One of the things that's awful about interviews is it's just extraction transaction. Like we're swiping cards. Like, I'm at the register and I'm gonna buy this information from you, and as if they're having to be the person on the other end punching in the keys or saying, please go, you can swipe the card now. Really? This is an interview. This is with a person. This is a possibility of a relationship. Who the heck knows? Who the heck knows? Maybe it's just even a cool spark. Maybe they mentioned something about their kid and boy, that reminded you of, the way you interact with your dad or your uncle or something. It just brings back a cool memory and it's a wonderful moment. It doesn't have to be, it's a lot of accidents happen, beautiful serendipitous accidents, if you will, of exchanges of life, not just information. In an interview, share the purpose in the interview though. We're not going so off tilt here that we're just going to talk and, about la-ti-da all day. We have to, one of the things is is a smart move here with chit chat is you take cue from them because there'll be a quiet moment where they'll kind of tuck in after you've talked about like the kids or something. Hey, and you also have to feel this out. Sometimes people don't want a lot of chit chat because they don't have a lot of time. They're looking at the clock. And then also wondering, is this person going to just want to do this and think that we're going to talk the whole time about that? It's harder when you're a rookie to know that transition point, but sometimes you can read the body language if you're in person. It's easier that way, obviously. In the Zoom situation, I would just say something that you knew about them. You just want to say you're grateful. In any way you can say thanks, and any way you can be specific to something about their bio, something they published, something they said, and referencing that as a way of showing appreciation, generally honoring them, if you will. All right, then getting the purpose of the interview. Saying, and I often do this with a thank you statement. Thanks for taking the 10 minutes to just chat about, how to market herbal teas at a regional market. Boom. All right. And then the allotted time, again, I tuck it in at that purpose statement, 10, 15 minutes. Ask them if they've got questions before you get started. Really important to take that pause and not charge in. Most times they'll say no because they're just wanting to get to and see what you got. But they'll have questions often by the end. So don't, it's not a one-time question there. We'll get back to that at the end here. If you are recording, again, ask for permission. So you're on Zoom, it's given that that's now all set up, meaning they came on. But if you are recording on your phone and you've prearranged it with email, you still need to stamp that on the phone, so to speak, meaning you need to have an agreement that's recorded. Usually the email will hold up. I'm getting technical now. This is when you extrapolate data and you're actually using it in any kind of publication form, there's a legal status. And so you have to have that. And usually emails will work there, meaning they confirm that they are fine with you recording it on a medium, but unless it's explicit in the email, heck, why not double it up? Hey, thank you so much for, we're interviewing, you can literally in recording, as soon as you start the recording, say, so, it's Tuesday, 9 a.m., I'm interviewing so-and-so, and I just want to ask you again, is this okay that we're recording? And the person can agree. Cool. And so they know that, right? And you're following protocols, really important, right? Types of questions in general, ask them that define the issue, that get you to other sources, that address gaps like what's going on in the market or something that could be assessed that hasn't been done that should be done. Often this is cool because gaps talk about niches. So let's take, for example, I've got quite a few people for the gig interview proposals that we're doing for a project here, looking at selling clothing, right? Looking at Poshmark, Depop, some kind of place where they can sell clothing, which is cool. But maybe what you're talking with a person, or maybe in an eBay storefront, you're talking with a person that does this, and you're asking, hey, so did you find yourself leaning toward a certain type of clothing? After a while, did you just do any kind of clothing you got? Was it men's, women's? Why did you specialize? Do you think there's a gap in the market? Is there a niche area that you don't cover that you think that could be covered? So always cool to think about that, comparing the past to present to future. Smart, smart, right? Where we've been in the market, where is it now? Where might it go? Rank and prioritize. These are all logic. So compare and contrast gets us into the idea of, differentiation. Rank and prioritize gets us into what comes first, second, third. It's pretty important. And then addressing these three, if you're dealing with environmental issues, uniqueness, timeliness, and precariousness. When we're dealing with climate change, this is from Robert Cox, who's former president of Sierra Club, also professor of communication, I believe, University of North Carolina, talks about how we need to be timely with whatever we're doing, or really emphasize that, how we need to be unique. Like, for example, if a species is dying, we better act now timely, right? Why? Because it's unique. There's only one and there's only like 20 of them left, right? And precarious, oh my God, we're on the cliff. And so it's kind of, if you will, all rolled in together. But it's really important to know that those are rhetorical tropes or aspects that need to be thought of. And so if we want to translate this into, let's say, what you're doing for your particular project. I got somebody wanting to do an online dance routine, and that's cool, and record it and allow people to see it, or do a couple lives initially on Instagram. Timely, it's COVID and people can't get to gyms. Oh yeah, that's timely. Unique, well, that's going to have to be thought through, right? As to, are there too many people doing the same thing, and how does that person differentiate? Maybe unique because they're appealing to a younger group. I don't know, maybe a certain demographic. Precarious, not so much, but precarious in the sense that maybe if the person did try to go to gym or do something different, it wouldn't be as advantageous. All right, decorum, we want to aim toward rarely asking yes, no questions, because they're kind of dud questions. If you do yes or no's, you do them quickly. So you're confirming things often early in the interview, and that can build momentum. So that's not always wrong. So for example, so I understand that you've worked here at your job is, and you just want to confirm your title of your job. Boom, and they give you the title. Okay. And how many years have you been here? 10 years. Okay. I mean, so those are very short yes, no's. I mean, in some ways they're yes, no's, right? They're actually factual questions that just have single word answers often. But they're good ways to build momentum. But 9 out of 10 times, what's good about a yes, no question is it sets up for the next question, which is why or how so. So for example, do you deem that your business at this point has been successful in, I mean, that's a kind of, maybe it's a knucklehead softball question, but it's off the top of my head. Yes, it is. Of course it is, right? Whatever. And then you go, why and how so? So smile back at me. Wasn't perfect, but it was there. Avoid leading questions. Leading questions are ones that say, don't you think that it's kind of strange that such and such, it's kind of a gossipy type question, and and the person might even be quizzical with you, like, how you're forcing the person to somewhat go along with the idea. Be clear, be brief. The shorter the question, generally, the better. Really true. Establish facts, garner opinions. Excellent. Listen actively. Listen actively is very much an act of your body language and your eye contact. And it's incredibly important on Zoom to be able to line up with that camera. And the other thing is to try to take the, at least get it at eye level, but if you could slant upward toward the camera, better. Most say 24 inches. And that way you don't get your nose distorted in the shot. So good idea. Make sure your lighting's good, but make sure you're listening actively. I use my hands all the time, right? You're getting obnoxious with this after a while, but it's a way to game in. In the case of the interview, maybe not, might be too aggressive, but you're definitely nodding, right? You're definitely looking at the camera and you're thanking them, and you're tagging on what they're saying, meaning you're reflecting back on what they said. All right, cool. Use follow-up questions. That goes along with listening actively. So you said this, I'm wondering what you mean, or could you tell me an instance of when that happened? This is going to be interesting. Toward the middle or the end of most interviews, you can start playing devil's advocate. It depends on the topic, depends on your moment. If you're obviously an investigative reporter, this might happen very immediately, but most times not. Most times you're actually having a conversation. This one is more of the difficult question of competition, when you might even be asking them about their own competition and how they deem the market. If you're talking to somebody actually running a similar business, micro gig business, if you're talking about confrontation with, say, a person that's giving you general information about, well, I don't know, let's say wild herbal teas. I mean, I don't know if there's much confrontation involved. um, play it as you think. Most times you're not going to have that issue for this particular gig. When you conclude, ask if there's anything else you'd like to say. Most beautiful question in the world, because probably somewhere in the interview they wanted to say more, and because of the flow of it, they couldn't, or something else popped in their head. And you got to give it some pause here on that question. Let them think for a moment. Is there anyone else you would suggest I talk to? Huge, huge. Any sources? So don't just say who you might talk to. Also ask for sources, because it could be print sources. And sometimes you might help elicit this from them. Like, is there a podcast that you listened to recently? Instagram post, Twitter, something on the web. So oh yeah, webpage, because they might not think sources is such a macro abstract word, doesn't mean anything until you actually attach it to maybe different mediums. All right, asking for permission to follow up with the interview. If I have any more questions, would you mind if I emailed you just to follow up? Oftentimes there's a happy yes. Okay, classy to send the thank you card and an email note of thanks for their times after the interview, would highly recommend. All right, this next part of the lecture you can skip or not, but they're going to give you some good questions that you might be able to ask in general interviews. All right, highly recommend this thank you card. Can't say enough. I actually had a person get a job by doing this. It's the truth. I had another gentleman I brought in as a PR expert at a really cool Hudson Dairy, which is a cool local dairy. And they're boutique dairies. They're a really interesting group. But he said somebody came to him for an interview. He had already hired somebody. The guy had sent him a thank you card anyway. And he was so impressed. He was talking to another PR consultant from another firm. The other guy so happens he was like looking for people and personnel in that same position. The other PR firm calls him up and they hired at another business. So it's crazy how that can make an impression. Types of interview questions: establishment and muse. Like establishment, say who's the who, what, where, when, why here of the business of whatever you're discussing. And muse questions are open-ended and ask them to share opinion and rank. You need to mix and match these often. Often establishment questions, obviously most important, maybe you might say, because they're fact-based. But the muse questions are just as important if you're going to start understanding the reasoning, right? The ranking and significance of data. Cool. And then establishment questions, let's get some examples. So questions that define quantity. How would you define blank? What research have you done germane to blank? Who do you consider authorities on blank? Right? Good. What policies in the past do you think were successful? About how many studies have been done on blank? How much money has been allocated by blank to address? Very good idea to think about the flow of money. One of the greatest ways to understand politics these days is to just simply follow the money trail. Who's giving money to what, for what purpose? Questions that locate the problem by place. Where do you think the most progress has been made regarding blank? What countries or locales are best addressing blank? And I'll do that one back just a moment because I think that was too fast. Sorry about that. Questions that locate by time. What key events in the past have led to? What is being done to address? What do you think will happen if blank isn't done? You can see how this is placing things sometimes in comparative contrast to what's been done in the past and what's been done in the future, what's being done right now, being done. All right, going to the open-ended questions. Is there an experience that stands out in your mind? So the first question often begs a story, and stories are great. If we can get to story level in any interview, you're into some really good stuff because that's where people naturally think. People think in stories. We like to hear stories. We process well with stories. It gets us to a different dimension of the way our minds work. We're now past transactional data. We're now thinking in an integrated scope, in a landscape, in a place and time. Long ago, in this faraway place. Why is there a place and why is it long ago? Because time and place become rolled into a story. And it's significant because our mind wants that. So is there an experience with blank that stands out in your mind? Could you tell me a story about blank? Can you give me an example? If you had to summarize the most important thing you learned about blank, what would it be? Those are really fun. This is ranking type questions. How do you feel about blank? What's your opinion about blank? What do you hope to accomplish with blank research? What might be missing? So we're thinking gaps here. What might be missing from the research conversation? Now we're going back to ranking first, second, third. What first made you think about this? Blank says this about blank. How do you respond? Excellent question. Incredibly important in journalism. So you have to use your other sources. And it's a great way to plant a devil's advocate without being rude. You know, they just have a different opinion. They've stated this. You're not saying that you agree with it. You're just saying it was stated. And how would you respond to that? Nothing wrong with that. It's one of the most brilliant questions and best ways to get information and see differentiation. What was the final push to motivate you to research or to do this? Look again, we're using first, second, third, final here. We're again looking for ranking. And people start thinking about process, right? That's what it gets them to think about. How has humans' perception of blank changed? I'm going to go back over that very quickly so that we've got it. You can fill in the blank. How has people in this region's perception of blank changed? So humans can be narrowed, obviously. Okay, how to find people to interview. Again, appendix. I'll run this table quick. Don't forget LinkedIn. Think of friends and family. Don't forget friends and family. They know people. Don't forget professors who know people. And so it's really interesting. Sometimes we go one stop to professors. Be careful with it. Professors get bombed all the time. Again, doesn't mean that it's wrong. Professors are paid. We're here to be here. Oh, my God, I hope we're here for people, right? For students, whether or not they're in our classes. But that's the point. They're technically paid more so for helping those students in their own classes. That doesn't mean that you're not going to take classes from them or that they're not also there for the university and for students in general. No, no, no. Matter of fact, I would say a lot of profs are really, really open to a very short but helpful information from other universities. So just don't think profs at ESF, SU, anywhere, especially if they have a particular bent toward your topic. They just have great information. So if it's brief, and again, brief, they might be able to get back to you. And you have to sometimes be somewhat pesky or persistent because there's a lot of flow. They often manage, a lot of people, in typical classes, plus they're managing with colleagues, plus they're managing with their supervisors and administration. So a lot of emails in their inbox. That would be the other thing I would say. I've said it a million times. People always look at me like I'm speaking French, but because it's a generational thing. We think the phone is like weird almost to use, like phone, ooh, I got a call. And I'm not mocking, I'm trying to honestly say what I've seen. And this is where things don't happen sometimes till we get to the phone, especially with an older generation. What does that mean? Like if you try to get an email interview and you emailed and you emailed and you emailed and you emailed and you don't get a response, might be the signal, right? And it's okay to do an email and then wait. I'd go after 48 hours, but even after 48, it's totally fine to pick up the phone and call. And there's nothing wrong with a very brief, polite phone call. Just wondering if we might be able to set up an interview. I had a few questions. You know, I would script it out if you feel uncomfortable with leaving a message. Always good to script out. I always scripted out all my calls, even when I was doing broadcast journalism, interviewing people. Before I picked up the phone, before I called them, I was ready to leave a message and ready to get them live either way. Okay. Course readings, people cited in a reading. Think about that. Think of Wikipedia, think whitepages.com. White Pages is kind of gone. It's still around. It's good. I don't know. It's not as helpful to me, but nonetheless, there are also great librarians with fantastic sources. So don't forget um, their infometrics. They know how to get to things and get to, if you will, live people as well as sources that are on the shelves. So they can be fantastically helpful. All right. Again, particular encyclopedias, they do exist just for lists of people that are part of associations and forums. Really, really powerful. And that be it. All right, guys. So thank you. And if you have more questions, as always, don't hesitate to try to reach out and contact me.